I needed subject isolation and punchy colour, but my lens and the landscape were both fighting me. I was ready to give up until I remembered a depth of field trick I could use in camera. But there's a catch. Wind and movement could ruin the photograph, and it would need a little post-processing. So in this video I'm going to take you through what I saw out in the field, what it was that attracted me to that particular subject, what I wanted to capture, what I wanted to bring to life, and then finally we're going to go back into the editing suite, and I'm going to try and explain to you how I emphasised even more in editing the things that I wanted to achieve. So on a recent trip up onto Dartmoor National Park, I came across this fantastic tree with these wonderful red berries standing out really nicely. The reason I really liked it was because I had these berries, but the tree was quite skeletal in form. It had already lost all of its leaves, and there was a bit of moss and ferns and things hanging off the tree itself. And the background was this beautiful sort of red, dark orange colour of autumn. And this really is what the open landscape of Dartmoor can look like in autumn. And for me, it represented a really good statement in that way. But the important thing that I needed to do was to understand what the subject was. And in this case, it's obviously the tree, because I'm going on and on about it. And I don't need to do much to the photograph, but I do need to make that tree stand out from the background. If you have a look at this raw file, this was taken with my 24-105 on my Canon 5D Mark IV, my trusty sort of combination that never lets me down. But despite it being fantastic, it didn't really quite get me where I wanted to go. Because even zoomed in fully at 105mm, I wasn't going to really get the background separation that I wanted, because this lens only goes to f4. And in fact, where I was stood, I may even needed to come back to maybe 70mm, 85mm or something like that. And it just wasn't going to give me the effect that I was after. The effect that I wanted to achieve was a blurred background, so this tree really stood out from it. And that's something that you can't easily achieve in post-processing without lots of use of AI. And my photography is centred and based out there on what we can achieve in the field. A fast lens, really expensive, around f2, f2.8, probably would have solved the problem. But I don't have that. I've got my 70-300mm Canon zoom, and it goes out to f5.6. So although being old, it's still my go-to lens when I want to compress perspective, when I want to zoom in and do what I can to reduce that depth of field. You see, with a longer focal length, depth of field reduces as well. And this is where I come up with a technical problem with this lens. But it's not so much a technical problem, it's more of a geography problem. At 300mm, if I want to use this lens and get all of the tree in, I have to be a long way back. And it just wasn't possible in the landscape. I needed to be closer. So this is the first part of where our depth of field trick actually comes in. It's not so much a trick, it's more of using the tools that we've got around us. You see, as I mentioned, using longer focal lengths allows us to get a shallower depth of field. And when I came across this situation on Dartmoor this time, it reminded me of a situation in the Lake District a number of years ago when I first used this method. So I thought it was a good thing to try again today, and also take the opportunity to share it with you. What I'm going to shoot is 2 or 3 different images, and then I'm going to stitch them together. Now, stitching is something that is normally thought about for panoramic photography, for producing those really wide-angle, expansive landscapes and scenes. But there is no rule that says stitching is just for producing panoramas. It can be used for a wide number of things. So let's go back to the situation that we've got. Why on earth would I do that? Well, it's simple. I can't get back far enough. I want a long focal length. So as soon as I zoom in, I chop off parts of the tree. So why not take more than one picture and stitch them together? So one of the concerns I had with taking this picture this way was subject movement. If I encountered any wind, any movement at all, the stitch wouldn't work. We'd get some ghosting and blurring, and it would ruin the image. So enabling me to do this, I went for a slightly faster shutter speed. I didn't have to worry about the aperture. We already want a shallow depth of field. But what I did sacrifice a little bit with the exposure, knowing that with my Canon camera I can pull back some details in those shadow areas in post-processing. So let's do that now. Let's go into the processing of the image. I'll show you how I achieved that and also how I stitch the images together. Okay, so here we are eventually back in front of the computer where it all happens. So basically the first thing we need to do is stitch the images together. To enable me to do that and make things a bit quicker for us, I've already opened up Lightroom Classic and I've selected the 3 images that I'm going to use. You may be able to see that they're actually a little bit darker than what I would normally start with. And I explained earlier that the reason for that is so that I can use that faster shutter speed to freeze some of the action. Now I've just selected those 3 images and we're going to open them up and stitch them together inside of Photoshop. There's probably other ways of doing it, but this is the way that I'm actually just used to working myself. So we go edit in and we're going to open them up as layers, not as individual images. This is very important and you'll see why shortly. And there we have the 3 images all sat in there ready to go. Now, as I said when I was talking about out in the field, it's very important that these images all meet up together perfectly. And this is why I've opened it up in Photoshop. We're going to select these 3 layers now. We're going to tell Photoshop that we want you to align these so that we can stitch them together. So we're going to select all 3 layers down in the layers panel. The way that my screen is set up may be slightly different to yours, but don't worry about that. If you want to get it as close to this you can, then just reset your workspace to the photography option and it will be fairly similar to mine. So if we go into edit, we can go down to auto align layers and now it's going to line these up. For the purpose of this video, we're just going to use auto. That's more than enough. I don't want anything complicated to get in the way of doing the job. We click on OK. And what Photoshop is doing now is it's measuring everything up and working out how that is going to look on the screen. So if we actually go view fit on screen, we can have a look at the image that we've got. You'll notice that we've got some areas at the top and the bottom which aren't exactly cleaned up exactly, they didn't merge perfectly well, but that's absolutely fine. You always get a little bit of distortion. I'm not actually worried about it because I'm going to crop my image anyway. And I've already decided that I'm going to crop this into something like a 10 by 8 format, one of the classic sort of compositional formats that we would have used back in the day of film. So I'm quite happy with that as it is. I'm going to go yes, absolutely fine. So I like doing the rest of the work back inside of Lightroom. So let's get back inside there and look at how we're going to do the image. So what we're going to do is we're just going to save this image as it is. We're going to go File, Save As. We'll put it back inside this folder here, Berry and Bracken, so I know where it is. And we're just going to call it, so we can find it nice and easily, we'll call it Stitched. There we go, Stitched Photoshop file. So now we can shut down Photoshop when that's finished. We can go back into Lightroom Classic. We can go into Berry and Bracken, and there is our stitched image ready for us to open up and look at. So let's go out of the library mode and go straight into develop. We don't need this at the bottom of the screen anymore. So there we are, we're there with our starting image for our edit. So my goals with this image, and it's always worth going back and thinking about what it was you actually wanted to achieve with your photograph when you started editing in the first place, was to get the tree to stand out a bit from the background. And do you remember we sacrificed the exposure for shutter speed? And we're going to go and fix that to start with. So let's start with some very basic edits. So to begin with, I'm going to lift the exposure a little bit. So I think if we just bring the exposure up, not a huge amount, there about 0.9. Yep, I'm quite happy with that. It's just lifted it enough, adds a bit of life back into the image. What I also want to do is bump the whites up a little. I think I can probably bring them up probably I don't know, maybe just a little bit plus 9. Don't want to overcook it. We don't want any burnt out areas, but I certainly want a bit of life inside the image. I'm also going to leave the blacks at 0. I don't want to add any more contrast to it. It's already quite dark down there, so let's just leave that exactly where it is at the moment. Now we can do some tricks in this. Let's shut down basic. We can do some tricks in this with the color mixer, because we've got some different tones in here that we can play with. So if we think about it, on the branches, look, we've got these reds on the berries, so we can make those stand out. And those, bringing that up is always increasing it already, look. So let's bring those up. I'm going to go quite heavy on that. I'm going to bring those up to about 42. I think that's a reasonable sort of balance in it. I want to drop the orange. Now we've got to be a little bit careful what we do with the orange, because we can lose the autumnal feel and make it feel quite grey. But we can take it back a little bit. Not a huge amount, just enough just to sort of make that bit of difference. And you see when I just switch that on and off, it's subtle, but you can just see that we have got a little bit more definition there and the tree stands out a little bit more. So that's working relatively well. We're going to be able to do some local adjustments on this as well. And what I'm going to do is, I think, try and make the tree stand out a little bit more. So we can go into our radial brush tool. I want to zoom out a little bit, maybe 25%, and I'm going to use a radial gradient. And I'm going to use that radial gradient, I think, just around the tree and the branches and everything itself. And I'm just going to drop just the shadows in that area by about -20. And we can do that. And that will just make the tree in the area a little bit darker. Excellent. And then I think we can probably add a gentle vignette as well, which is the reverse of this. So if we get ourselves another radial gradient, add another one. Thank you very much. Suits you, sir. And then we will draw that one out as well. But this one we're going to go right out. We're going to go big. Go big or go home, they say, isn't it? And we're also going to invert it so we can see what we've got. And we want to draw it right out. That's it. Look, let's make that a bit bigger in the middle. Make that a bit bigger as well. That's it. Draw that right out the outside edges. There we go. And then what we can do is we can darken the exposure on there a little bit. So let's pull that in. Let's go into extreme. Look, you can just see those edges get a bit darker. And we're going to pull that down a couple of stops. And I think if we go back to 100%, oh wow, let's go back to fit. I just want to finish off with a little bit of sharpening, So lose that, go into detail. I think we'll just go to 100% so we can just see what we're looking at, and we'll bring the sharpening up. Make those berries sing. There we go. So that's really worked quite well. And whilst we're zoomed in at this point, just take a look at that background. See how it's nice and blurred and how we've got that nice sort of shallow depth of field giving us that separation between the tree in itself. So let's go back out to 100% on that. So before I say any more, let's have a look at that final image. So I'm really pleased with the way that final image turned out. The tree does stand out against the background, but I would like it to have been a little bit stronger. The vignette helps and it draws your eye into the scene. I could have gone further with the colour adjustment and really reduced those brackens a little bit more, but I would have lost that nice autumnal feel. Photography is about compromise, and that's one of the difficulties with having artistic vision and something that we want to achieve. Sometimes we just have to compromise on what it is we can do. So if you're facing challenges with your photography, then subscribe to my channel, and of course, Get out and practice. I'll see you in the next video.